This is an interview conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. The date of the interview is November 18th, 2015. Our veteran's name is David M. Trieger. He was born on July 12, 1921. He served in World War II in the Army in the Pacific. Highest rank achieved was corporal. We're recording this interview in San Luis Obispo, California. My name is Michael Klingler. I'm the interviewer. There's no one else in the room with us. And again, this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. So David, give me a few details about your early life, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I'm one of 7 children. My parents immigrated from Austria, and I grew up in the times of the Depression, and it was, as far as I'm concerned, I was a little fella at that time, and it didn't really hurt me that much because the rest of the family, I guess, I was the baby, and they kind of kept things away from me. And as I reached a later age and things were still a little tight with the economy, I thought it would be a good way to help ease the situation with the family, and so I volunteered for the Civilian Conservation Corps, the federal branch that they started, and I went away to Idaho, and that was the first time I left New York City ever. And I enjoyed it very much, and then I got homesick and I wanted to go home, and so when the enlistment was up, I came home, and I really wanted to go back badly after I got home for a while. And that was 1939. And then the rest of 1939 was just growing up and doing little jobs to help, and Europe was at war. And then along came 1940, and I was getting of age, and I thought to myself, they were talking conscription already. They had set up the mechanism, and I thought, well, go in and do your 3 years, and you'll be out, and that'll be the end of it. Of course, 5 years later is when I really got out. So I enlisted, and I originally was with the Coast Artillery. And I was stationed locally, which made it very nice. I was able to see family and friends. And then after a while it became slightly boring, this being inactive and being in the Army. And so I volunteered for, when we got into it, they were asking for gun pointers, and I was a gun pointer on a 3-inch gun in New York Harbor. And I thought it would be a good idea to volunteer for, they were having, they wanted gun pointers for gun tubs, the artillery on merchant ships. So I thought I'd volunteer for that, and as it turned out, I think I was very lucky that the commander of the 5th Coast Artillery, which I was part of, didn't want to release gun pointers, so I stayed on there. And then later on in time, I don't know who moves the checkers around, but I was sent when they brought in a new classification of when they draft people.
So, the Selective Service?
Yes, Selective Service. They brought in another designation of categories of men who weren't that fit. And they took over they realized the Germans weren't coming into New York Harbor. So they put these fellows at work there, and we were moved out west. And I ended up in a glider outfit. They trained us in New Mexico in the high desert. And as an aside, when we weren't there, we went into town in El Paso, Texas, is where I met my future wife, who was with me for 71 years.
Wow. Okay.
So we went through all the training, and then as the Army generally plays little tricks on you, we got orders all of a sudden to go overseas, and lo and behold, instead of North Africa, which we were trained for, we went to the Pacific.
Where in New Mexico?
It was an area north of what they call Waco Tanks.
Another big town, huh?
No towns. No towns around. Rattlesnakes, but no towns.
Okay.
So we ended up going on a ship that later I really appreciated. They didn't put us on a transport. They put us on the Matsonia, which used to be a ship of the Matson lines that used to run to Hawaii. And its sister ship was the Laura line. The innards of the ship was still civilian. And the outer part of the ship was painted gray and it had gun tubs. They put gun tubs on it. And we manned the gun tubs going over. And I enjoyed that trip. It was great. Civilian help running the mess and everything else. They even had a tailor on board. I don't know what we'd use him for. But and we finally, 14 days later, landed in Brisbane, Australia. We stayed in Brisbane at a racetrack. They put us up for 2 nights, and then they moved us on that was an experience. They moved us on a narrow gauge railroad that they had that ran to the north of Australia to a place called Townsville. Mm-hmm. And it's near the Great Barrier Reef, I guess. And there was jungle, and they retrained us quickly, I guess to get used to the foliage around and that people could hide in it rather than on the desert. And the upshot was that we stayed there about 2.5, 3 months. And one thing about it was the steak and eggs were great. And then we ended up being transported on APAs up to Port Moresby, New Guinea. And we stayed there quite a while, about 7 months or 6 months, about a half a year, and continued training. And then one day, I guess the orders came in, and they flew us over the Owen Stanleys in New Guinea, and we landed wherever the airfield was. I don't remember, but we ended up in Oro Bay, which was the embarkation to our first combat experiences, and that's the one that I found the most interesting and different of all the places I'd ever been.
How do you spell Oro Bay?
O-R-O and Bay.
Oh, well, thank you.
And we really were kind of taken back by when we, with all our equipment and everything, and we're moving down to the pier, and all we saw, we didn't see any APAs, no troop transport ships, but destroyers. And they loaded us onto destroyers, and we couldn't understand what was going on because we weren't Navy. What were we doing on destroyers? And they didn't let us know anything about the operation until we were well underway. And these destroyers were Old World War destroyers with 3 of the funnels taken off. And there were very light landing craft. They were landing craft, but I guess they were the first ones that they ever used. They had 2 ports where, and I was amazed to find out that the men that manned them were not Navy, they were Coast Guard. And they were manning 30 caliber machine guns on the front portholes, not portholes, but recessions. There was a portion of the ship that was given next to the little landing ramp. And so we took off, and then they told us we were going to Los Negros in the Bismarck Archipelago.
Why were the 3 funnels taken off?
To make room for
the landing craft?
For the landing craft.
Okay.
I think they were called APDs by designation. It would be Attack Personnel Destroyer, I guess. But that was a great ride. I thought that was really the cat's meow.
How long were you on the destroyer?
Overnight.
Just overnight?
Just overnight. They were taking us there. We went on board in the evening, and we sailed all through the night, and they were really cutting along. Well, I guess a destroyer has that ability. And they had more modern destroyers with us, but I guess they didn't have the ability to carry a landing craft. But anyhow, I thought it was a great ride. It was cold, but it was great. And then early in the morning, they fed us steak and eggs, and they said so long. We disembarked, and we made a landing at a place called Haine Harbor, and the way the story goes, that wasn't supposed to be the original landing spot. They were supposed to be around the other side of the island at a place called Klingler Harbor, which was a very good big harbor, but I guess MacArthur was trying to outfox the Japanese general, and he went into a place where they didn't expect him.
So how do you spell Haine? Is it H-A?
Hayne.
Okay, and then the place you actually landed.
No, we landed at Haines. Everybody thought we'd go to Klingler because it was an excellent harbor and a beach for landing, and Haines was not, and that's how we outfoxed the Japanese. Japanese were expecting it as the great landing spot, and we went in this little harbor, Haines Harbor, and the ships couldn't really get too close because it was a small harbor. And
give me the spelling of the place you were supposed to land.
Seegler, Klingler Harbor. And they also told us that this, of course, was a reconnaissance in force. They thought that the islands were lightly held. It turned out that they had 3,500 to 4,000 Japanese Marines there. And this was a reconnaissance in force, so that in case we couldn't stay with it, couldn't hold the place, we were supposed to evacuate. And they gave us, they told us to put up flares, and they designated a place where they would pick us up. And as things worked out in the end, that was the last spot we were able to take on the island. That was the last. The Japanese held on to that with such tenacity that was the last spot we could get. So it was a good thing that we were able to hold the place.
And you had about 1,000 men, as I understand.
We had 1,000 men.
Okay.
And I guess the thing that made them go in at Haines Harbor was the fact that Mamoti airstrip, that's what we were after, the airstrips, was just 200 yards in from the landing site. So that probably was the reason that we've made the landing there rather than around the other end of the island at Klingler. So
How do you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, it's so much easier to get the spellings of the names now rather than have the logging person trying to figure out later. So how do you spell the name of that airstrip?
Mamoti. No, it's M-O, not, it's Momoti. M-O-M-O-T-T-O.
Thank you.
And, well, it was, to be truthful with you, it was a hard-fought place. We also had, don't know. Should recount
Go ahead.
our heaviest casualty.
Let me just tell you what. Okay, I want to have lots of detail that you're willing to give, but it is public information, so that's the only caveat I give to you. So, but battle casualties, experiences in the battles you had, absolutely fine to talk about.
Is it recording what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the heaviest casualties that we sustained was by our own, not our own troops. The weather was very inclement weather, and we could only get help from, they sent over 324s, B-24s were the only things that were able to come in. And the only real guns we had were from destroyers and 2 cruisers. And as I said, the weather was inclement, and 3 B-24s got through, and then there was a particularly bad spot right near the strip, and they called for more firepower, and some B-25s came in. And how that could happen, I don't know, but we came from the ocean, so we were on the ocean side of the airstrip that we were trying to take, and they mistook us for the enemy, and they bombed us instead of them. So that was it kind of knocked you down for a bit. But
how many casualties do you think you took from those bombs?
Well, I know 3 were killed. One fellow that I knew from all the way back east, he actually disappeared. He was laying on some shells and cases of shells, and it hit there, and he was gone completely. And then there were 2 other fellows, from my outfit. Now, what the Cav took, I don't really know, but that when we got to walking in the cemetery, it was big. So, so for my outfit, for the landing, we took 3 casualties right there, and that was the most that we got in the landing. So, so eventually that place was taken.
How many days did it take?
The mopping up always takes much longer, but the original operation started on February. I'm trying to get this. Leap year day, February 29th, and it went into the middle of March.
Okay.
And we secured the island, but there was still much mopping up to do. And then we just got cleaned up afterwards because the Navy Seabees came in. And they saved the day. We started to actually work for them. My captain went over to them because we had been eating nothing but these canned rations. And he volunteered our guys to work for them in whatever form they needed help, and asked if they would feed us. My outfit, by the way, was only comprised of 85 men. It was 4 machine gun squads. We were heavy machine guns, 50 caliber heavy machine guns. So, and we were used generally to give firepower, heavy firepower, and we were able to be more mobile than others. So, this Navy person, whoever he was, said sure, and till we left that island, we were eating pretty nicely.
Did the Japanese on that island have their own air power to?
No, they had the airstrips until they were immobilized by our Air Force. They were pounding them. I think his name was Kennedy, General Kennedy. And they, in fact, he's the one that told him it was lightly held because he didn't see any activity there. And they were holding on to quite a bit of. They dug trenches very much like the Vietnamese had underground, but not as extensive as the Vietnamese. But they did burrow underground and put palm tree trunks of trees on top of it. You couldn't tell hardly where they were. In fact, when General MacArthur landed there, it wasn't maybe 15 minutes right past where he walked that they knocked out an underground dugout. And that was a hard place to dig foxholes. You couldn't dig foxholes. It was coral. It was hard as cement. So most of the stuff you looked for was bomb holes where we shelled it, and there was a cut or depth, a cut in the earth, and we put the machine guns in there, and we'd use it for our own cover for bodies. So that's what ended up in Los Negros in the Admiralty Islands. And then from there they took us back to New Guinea on the Hollandia landings. And we stayed there about 8 months in Hollandia. There were 3 airstrips, and they told us to set up guns around the airstrips. I guess it was to be used as anti-aircraft firepower. And then after that, we embarked to the Philippines. And we ended up in Leyte on day 2 of the landings. And
what's the approximate date that you got there? Do you know offhand?
In Leyte?
Leyte. Or a month? That's okay.
I don't remember. This encompassed, I was out there 3 years. I don't even remember the day that they came to me and said, okay, you've got high points, you're going home. I don't even remember that day. All I knew was I was going.
That's all you needed to know.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the Philippines, we landed in Leyte, and that was interesting too. Some things happened there that were interesting. The Japanese at an airstrip that we were trying to take, they actually took our planes that were already there. This was our strip. They landed in a DC-2. Now, we used for paratroops, for glider landings, the pull gliders, DC-3s. And the only difference between the 2 planes was the fairing on the vertical, they were rounded out in the later model. Yeah. And they landed a DC-2 on this strip. This was right below, between Dulag and that city that just got hit last year by a big hurricane, Tacloban. There was an airstrip there at theirs. We took it and developed it, put down our planes quickly, and then they held the airstrip, and we had to go to get it back. They actually picked up the tail end of our airplanes, and one of their people, whoever they were, Japanese, got into the thing, and they were swinging the plane around from side to side and firing the guns on it.
Interesting.
So the things that happen that you never expect.
Yeah.
So Leyte, that was the deal with Leyte, although that ended up taking months and months. We were not in on the operation in North Leyte, where the infantry took a bad beating. I guess this Japanese general was the Tiger of Malaysia. Yamashita, I think his name was. But anyhow, after Leyte, we got caught with some bad stuff when we were landing. That's when the Japanese started to they really started to employ it at Leyte, but we didn't get hit with it. We were off the ships at that time. We just got inland. But But in Mindoro, when we tried to land at Mindoro, they were kamikazing us. And that's scary. That is scary because there's nothing you could do. The person is just trying to do away with themselves and they just throw caution to the winds. So Mindoro was kind of scary. And also a naval unit bombarded us. There were artillery shells from a Japanese unit. They were very active coming through the Philippines from the north, trying to, well, I guess you must have heard about the Leyte landings that the Navy went on a wild goose chase, chasing the Japanese fleet north, and to take them away from the landing area of Leyte. And then it was only the jeep carriers of the Navy that saved the day. But then later on, of course, when the Japanese Navy really came in force around Leyte, the Navy was able to do what they called crossing the T. It was something that, it was an operation where the Japanese had to come through this strait, and our units were sailing straight across at them and just bombarding them as each Japanese passed in review, so to speak. So we were worried about the Leyte landings, to put it.
Were you experiencing kamikaze attacks only when you were on the ships or also when you were on the land?
We never got it on land. Only when you were landing, they were trying to hit the Navy ships.
Okay.
Plus, they were hitting the APAs, which are the large transports. I only traveled on a large transport 2 times, but the one at Leyte was where they were kamikazing the APAs.
What was it like to experience the kamikazes coming at you?
The worst part was in Mindoro, they took us up on LSTs to Mindoro, and they wouldn't let us on deck. We had to stay under deck. And there were portholes, to get up to the top deck from the compartments on the side where personnel stayed. And we later, when things started to we started to look around our surroundings to see how do you get off this thing if you have to. So we opened up one of these things, and it was a Jeep on top of it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they had parked stuff right on it. So there you are. You can hear all the gunfire and everything. Even from the ship that you were on, it would start maybe at the front end of the ship, like at the bow. If they were tracking an aircraft, it would go to the stern, and you'd hear all this, and you were under there, and you didn't know any second now that it's going to come down on you. It's a feeling of entrapment.
Scary.
You don't know if you're going to be there. Any time could have been over. So, but I'll say this. Mindoro is where they gave me the word I'm going home. So Mindoro was a nice place. And as far as the Army, I think it was a wonderful experience, except for the bad times. And, I was glad to leave it, but it taught me a lot. The Army taught me to be disciplined. It taught me to be clean. I'm a person who puts everything in its place. To this day, I live in my own home by myself. My wife passed away 2 years ago. And I put everything the way it was in a footlocker. Everything is in place. And I pass inspection by my own inspection.
David, what was the most memorable experience of your time overseas?
Do you mean good?
If it was good, good. If it was not so good, whatever stands out in your mind.
Well, I think that operation in Los Negros, that's why I wanted to record it. it was the most different thing I ever took part in. It was frightening, and it taught me that I was the corporal of the gun crew, and it taught me that you can't rely strictly on yourself. You have to rely on others. And so I think that was the most memorable thing that happening in my whole Army career, that landing right there. The other ones were routine. You did it a certain way, and according to how the Army taught you to do it. But that was different. Los Negros was different. And most people have never heard of it. No. That's the irony of it.
Yeah. What was it like transitioning back into civilian life?
I did it pretty easily because I had a family. And they just made it easy for me to become a civilian. I saw things in civilian life that didn't lay right with me because I used to remember how I did it in the Army, and I thought, gee, they don't do things right here. But anyhow, I went into civilian life. I slid into the civilian life nicely. Had a hard time getting some clothes when I come out of the Army, but my sister helped me on that one. She dressed down some person selling suits, really dressed them down, told them, this is a veteran, just come home, and she came with him. I got 2 suits instead of 1.
What kind of work did you do back in civilian life?
Well, I was a very young person when I went into the service, you know. But I did hold a job before I went into the CCC. I used to make medical products. It was it had the word medical in it too. Medical Metals, I think it was called, incorporated. And it was in Manhattan. In fact, while I was working at this place, I watched the first American battleship that was built of the new battleships, the North Carolina, I could see over to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I watched her slide into the East River. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
And did you carry on with that same career after you got out of the service?
Oh, no. I ended up with the United States Postal Service. My life has been all with the government, from the CCC to the United States Army to the United States Postal Service. And I worked for the post office for 34 years. And in New York, I worked in New York, and the post office is very impersonal there. There were 1,200 men on one shift in Grand Central Post Office in New York. And you wouldn't even know who the postmaster was, other than the fact that this man had one arm. And when we saw a one-armed guy go through, that was the postmaster. When I finally transferred to California, and that was because of my wife, she couldn't put up with New York. She was a California girl. I met her in Texas, but she was a California girl. And so when I got transferred, I worked at it, but I got a transfer to California, and in Santa Barbara, which is a lovely place. And the difference was tremendous. Here was the New York post office, which was so impersonal. You only knew the small little group around you, just like in the service. You only knew your own company or battery. And here in the post office in Santa Barbara, I sat down right in the middle of a family. It was beautiful. All the time I thought it was so great that I worked in Santa Barbara. And I actually, I became the president of the union, and I am one of the few people who has been on retirement longer than I worked.
Well, good. Tell me about your experience with the VA.
I actually, as I sit here, I don't think I would have been here today if it wasn't for the care that the VA's given me. I gave myself over to the medical system of the VA as soon as I came out of the service. And they've taken care of me all the way. They, to this day, I have a wonderful doctor, and I was really sick about 2 years ago, and they actually contacted civilians to take care of me. So I hold them in the highest regard, and I realize today they are overloaded with the Afghan people coming back and people from Iraq, and so if things happen a little on the slow side, I understand it. They have their hands full, but they've done well with me.
Good. And you had an experience with the VA with getting radiation.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, when I came out of the service, I had what was, I guess you call it a skin condition, but back in the service it was called jungle rot. And the idea it was over my face and under my neck and everything. And I went to the VA, and I guess that was the procedure. They put lead stuff in my eyes and around the top of my head and on my chest. And I had 12 treatments on my neck and face for this jungle rot. And then years later, after the business of the bikini things and where we were exploding atomic weapons, they came out and said that, well, they found out they were getting a lot of sick fellows that were exposed. And they put out an edict that anybody that was exposed to radio activity should turn in and get checked for whether they might get cancer. So I came in and I had to get checked, but they had a little difficulty finding my records because they were destroyed. So anyhow, through the county veterans officer here in St. Louis, they found the connection for me, and I was checked out on that thing. And obviously, nothing was wrong because here I am at 94.
Well, great. Anything else you'd like to add, David?
No, except that I'm happy about people, and I see things happening in the world, and thankfully, the service that we gave to our country and what it's done for our country, it's helped, and the results are great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your telling your story, and as I said before, this goes to the Library of Congress, and it's of benefit to everybody in the country who takes the time to go look for stories of veterans, and it's a part of our history. So thank you.
Yeah, and I thank you.
Okay.